Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors, officers, any others who have come to this meeting. Lovely to see you. This is the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting for the 12th of November 2024. Please be advised, everybody, that this is a public meeting and is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. We'll start with item number 1, declarations of interest. They look like there are none, so we'll move on to agenda item number 2, apologies for absence and substitutes.
Sorry, I have no apologies, Chair. Thank you.
I know Councillor Goodman's on his way, but he messaged me, so he will be here at some point. Item number 3, minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 29th of October. Do we have any comments or things we want to say about those?
I just want to make a comment about the whistleblowing item, because as you know, it was withdrawn when it went to Cabinet, and I was just I was a bit perplexed really why it even came to ONS if it hadn't been read by the portfolio holder, because that's what was said at Cabinet. You know, as you know, you were sitting there, you heard that, you know, and I just thought realistically it shouldn't even come to us if it couldn't go on to Cabinet. So I just thought it was something to bear in mind, really. Thank you.
Don't know if anybody sat at the top table want to say anything about that. No. Yeah, the leader of the council informed me that the decision was made beforehand. She told me and let me know in a phone call that would be the case, but I too slightly confused how that came to be. So I think, as was she, as you could hear from her language. Yeah. Okay, we move on to Chairman's announcements, of which there are none, because I was going to mention that, but we've now preempted that, so that's fine. Councillor Goodman's about. Hello. Well, we go to item then number 5, public speaking. Is there any public speaking? Although we do have a good audience tonight, so it's nice to see. We move then on to item number 6. We're very pleased to welcome Sarah Taylor, the Police and Crime Commissioner, here. Hello and welcome. And we've got Mike also assisting with this, and Nick as well. We've got the dream team. So we'll hand over to you to talk to us. Thank you.
Okay, hello, good evening. So this is a novel experience for me, because I was not given an agenda and I was not given a list of things you'd like to hear from me about. So I just thought I'd start from the very beginning, which is to assume absolutely nothing. And one thing I have learned is that very few people actually understand the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner. So without being too weird, I hope, is there maybe a quick show of hands? Is it like everyone completely 100% confident they know exactly what the PCC does? I'm glad that I can. Yeah, and great, Sue too. Thank you, Sue. I'm gratified. Okay. A bit. Yeah, well, that's good, but actually most people have got their hands down, and that's been my experience just in general. Actually, it doesn't really seem to matter who I talk with, whereabouts in the county they are, what their job is, what their role is. So politically, there is a really big gap basically in understanding. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just start there and I'll work my way through a few things. But what I'd like to think is that this could be the start of a dialogue rather than a one-off and, you know, ask me all the questions now and that's it for 4 years. I would really invite everyone in a room to participate in that dialogue with me to just make things better for our residents, basically. I mean, that is the job as I see it. So the Police and Crime Commissioner role was devised about 13 years or so ago now, and it started off relatively small and succinctly described as I think the legislation describes it as the role is responsible for the totality of policing in an area, which is a little bit mind-blowing, and that you are, as the Police and Crime Commissioner, you hold the Chief Constable, there is a specificity there, you hold the Chief Constable to account. And those things, I think, are quite... It's like, we understand what each individual word means, but in practice, what does it actually look like? And that's the thing that I think most people struggle with. Like, what does it actually mean to hold the Chief Constable to account? What does it actually mean to be responsible for the totality of policing? What does the totality of policing mean? You know, because obviously I'm not out there with handcuffs, kind of nicking people. So my interpretation of it is that if you look at the body of responsibilities that the PCC role embodies, and it is a weird thing, I feel slightly Hindu godlike, because you are like a physical embodiment, you are corporation soul legally, and the Chief Constable is the other corporation soul. So unlike councillors, and I'm a councillor at Broadland, I'm a gang of one. It's not a whipped kind of environment. There is a Labour group of PCCs, there is a Conservative group of PCCs, and we communicate really well within those groups and across those groups. There is very little sort of political divide, but actually that the PCC is solely responsible for that. And you are held account in various sort of ways, Police and Crime Panel being one sort of such mechanism. And my role, as I see it, is to encompass a very wide range of things. At its absolute core, my interpretation is that I have to be the voice of every part of our community into policing. And what that means in practice is that I go out a lot and I talk with people and I listen with people and then I do something. Now, what that doing looks like, it might be a conversation with the chief, it might be a conversation with another part of the force, it might be a conversation with one of the partners within the community safety partnership, it might be writing a letter to the Home Secretary, which has happened a few times already. You know, it can look like any number of different things. It might be, as I did today, sending your animal licensing team a letter that I've been forwarded. It can look like lots of different sort of outcomes, but I think principally it's about facilitating something within our communities, and often it is basically people's experience of working with the system is that the system is broken. And so I see, my interpretation is that I want to help people navigate what is a really challenging system to navigate. That's what it sort of boils down to. In terms of what that means in terms of the accountability piece, I see it as holding the Chief Constable to account isn't in splendid isolation from everything else. My background is that my family, everyone in my family, with the noble exception of myself and my brother, have forged careers in the armed forces. And I am aware through my professional work that it's entirely possible to both have the back of an organisation and hold them to account. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. And actually, if we want a police service that is in service of and within our communities and which is sustainable, and that people working in that force feel a sense of pride in there, well, then they need the politicians around them to support them in achieving that, but also to hold them to account when things don't go as well as they might. So the accountability looks like me having conversations with the chief, which we do very regularly. It looks like some of the more structured meetings, like the PCC accountability meeting that happens once a quarter. And I invite public questions, and I literally ask those questions for the public. So everybody around the table, please feel free to get those questions in, because that is a really good opportunity to have your own residents' questions raised. You're absolutely welcome to get in touch with me anyway outside of that, but that's a particularly good forum because it's public, and you're of course welcome to join that meeting as members of the public, in effect, as in not parties around the table, but you're more than welcome to join that. And then beyond those two parts, there are an enormous number of statutory duties and responsibilities that the PCC has, whether it's from I have a statutory ability to convene people, which I think is a really fascinating superpower to be embodied in legislation. And what that means in practice is that, because ultimately working within one system, so it recognises the fact that for policing to work, we've got to have really strong relationships within the rest of the system. So all of those different partners, all of the councils, everyone within the Community Safety Partnership, the Health and Wellbeing Board, the ICB, the ICP, NSFT, all of the acronyms are sort of encapsulated within my work. And that is something that I take really, really seriously. Coming from my professional background, which is within engineering, I really understand how a high-performing team works well when it's deeply collaborative. And so I'm bringing that mindset into this role. And then beyond that, it's everything else, which is to say that recognising all of the different parts of the system, all of the different organisations who work with people either within the criminal justice system or victims or the families of victims or, you know, anything on the edge of that, there will be a relationship between me, my office and those organisations. So another core part of my role is, as the Victims Commissioner, I have a duty to make sure that the Victims Code is being properly delivered by the police and that victims are properly and appropriately supported as they navigate the criminal justice system. So a thing that a lot of people don't realise, despite the C word being part of my job title, is that I commission services. I have money, I commission services to make sure that victims are well cared for. In some cases, that perpetrators, particularly if it's a trauma response that can catalyse perpetration, that perpetrators are supported to not to re-offend. That's a really critical thing. We just can't deal with some things unless we deal with perpetrators as well. And then there's commissioning services around other aspects of preventing crime. That's a huge amount of work that other PCCs do, and one that I'm really looking forward to getting into. And what that commissioning looks like can really depend on the needs of each individual area and also the priorities that each PCC looks at. So you might be aware that I have just completed a police and crime plan consultation. You might being the operative word, be aware. It's incredibly difficult to get engagement with something unless people have actually experienced that something. And we're seeing that in the numbers. We've had just shy of 2,000 responses from across Norfolk, which isn't too bad. But 65% of those, we haven't finished the data entry yet, so just a bit of a health warning on the numbers, but about 65% of the responses were from people who have been a victim of crime. So of course it's a self-selecting group, and we can look at the responses through that lens. And what comes through in the initial sort of data that we're looking at, again with that health warning please, is that people really want to see a greater focus on prevention in Norfolk. There is an understanding that the police are just one link in the chain of the criminal justice system, but that they're at the sharp end of it. So every time a court date gets changed, the police have to then go and deliver that information to the victims. And so people have made it quite clear in some of the responses that they really want to see that criminal justice system sort of tightened up locally, and that is in the gift of the PCC to actually facilitate those meetings and that work, which is not a small piece of work. All of those responses from that police and crime plan consultation will be sort of obviously analysed and will form the evidence base for the police and crime plan, which is the statutory document that I have to produce, and that will be being adopted in early spring next year, probably April. And alongside that, there'll be a raft of other information, like what that actually means in practice, the delivery plan that goes with that, how we're going to communicate it to the public and how their thoughts are going to come back in, you know, what that reciprocal dialogue looks like, how we're going to fund it, what kind of commissioning services we might be looking at, and whether they are hyper-local or whether they're county-wide, because there's space for both. So that is the police and crime plan, which, as I say, is it's not even yet emerging, if you know what I mean. The data is only just being collected, and we're sort of cranking the handle on that. And next week, because one consultation isn't enough in any autumn-winter period, we are starting our precept consultation. So every year, as you're probably aware, we have to consult on the level of precept setting. And there's been a traditional approach to this, which is that, and I don't want to sound dismissive, but I think you can see a trend, which is that this is the amount of money that we need. This is the amount of money that we have. If we want to do that big shiny thing over there, we need some more money. So we're going to ask you for more money through that precept setting process to pay for that big shiny thing over there. Bluntly, we can't do that. The days are gone where the big shiny thing over there gets to be paid for through precept rising. We are, I'm sad to say, after a number of years of cuts from the Home Office funding, and despite best efforts within this area, as for many others, in the space where if we want our cuts to be as small as possible, we're going to have to increase council tax. That is where we are. We cannot maintain how things are now, given the current level of funding, and given the precept level that we think. There's a lot of guesswork because we don't know yet what our maximum will be, but we think that if it is the level that has tended to be put in place, we will have to make cuts next year. So it has potential to be incredibly gloomy, a lot of this, because actually everyone in the constabulary that I speak with wants to do a really good job. All of our partners want to do a really good job, but there's always the financial sort of Damocles as well. So the reason why I'm here is to, as I say, let you know something about the role if you didn't know already, and I hope that that is useful, although I just feel like I've just dumped a whole lot of information on you, and to make it really plain that local members, all of us, can really actively participate on behalf of our residents. So a lot of politicians of all sort of parts of our government, from national through to parish council, have been getting in touch with me with issues that their local residents are facing. Please do that. opccn at norfolk.police.uk is the email address for that. And we are getting through an awful lot of work there, and I would invite you to do the same on behalf of your residents. Literally anything. I've had Jerome Mayhew MP's office has been in touch a number of times, which is great. We've had everything ranging from stuff that definitely isn't a police matter, like dog fouling, verge cutting, but happy to divert, right the way through to people who are trying to navigate their way through the criminal justice system after a homicide, IPP sentences, really, really difficult things as well. So it's the whole gamut. Nothing is off the list, if you see what I mean. The other thing that I'd really like to engage with all councils on is how we can work together in partnership to deliver better things for less money for our own residents, because that's a problem that we all have. So there are things that are happening within our commissioning, like NIDAS. So you might be aware of that, which is a really fantastic piece of work that works with people coping and recovering from domestic abuse across the county. It's a county-wide provision, and we have 3 funding partners within that. I would really like to see more work providing that consistency of approach, because my fear is that somebody experiencing something of this in one part of the county then has to move themselves to escape that situation, and that safety net is removed because they no longer live within that district. So for some things, I think that county-wide approach to commissioning is really, really vital, and I'd love your help to make sure that for those sort of mission critical elements, we can continue to provide that offer between us. And the other thing is at the opposite end of the spectrum, which is the hyper-local. So there has been an awful lot, as I say, a focus on prevention within the police and crime plan responses so far. And for a lot of people, that seems to come across very strongly as around specifically our young people, around the youth provision. We all know, we can see it. It's been absolutely decimated over the years. I think that's just a statement of fact. And so where we are now and where I am looking at is basically how can we, as a network of interested people wanting to do good work for our own communities, how can we join forces to put in place services in our local communities that our local residents need? And then almost sort of incidentally, that prevention piece works because that support is then starting to come around individual families or individual young people, that kind of thing. So I don't even know how much time I had to speak, but that's my monologue for now. I'm really happy to take any questions at all now and in the future. And as I say, I hope this will be the start of that dialogue.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be some questions. I'm hoping there will be. Who would like to ask or say something? Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioner Taylor. Welcome to your new role. You said at the start that you thought that the system you've inherited was broken. Do you think you've got the facility to be able to put it together again? I'm also wondering, having taken up the role in the last 6 months, would you think that the situation has been a surprise to you as to what you've inherited, shall we say? Thank you.
So I definitely did not say, and you'll have to forgive me, but I've come from years of giving expert witnesses testimony, so I like my precision. I definitely didn't say that it was the system that I inherited that was broken. It's the system. So, and my experience on that is I had a family member who was in hospital for 8 months, and every damn day I had to phone a hospital to literally to make sure that that person had been fed. And so my experience of navigating a system that I actually know quite well has, even despite that knowledge, been incredibly rage-inducing, anger-inducing, frustrating, and also perilous for my family member. And when I talk with people who are going through difficult times, which can only be the case if they've had to interact with the police, something is going on which is not good. Do you know what I mean? Like, fundamentally, that is a truth. And the interactions, either with the police or with the criminal justice system, the failures and the gappiness sort of compound each other, basically. So it's not necessarily my system, the police system, it's the system, because I think we can all recognise just as people that when we're trying to get things done in our own lives, trying to navigate the system in our own lives, unless we happen to be the portfolio holder for that particular thing in our area, like we do come across those issues. So what I'm trying to do is recognise that that's people's actual experience, that frustration and anger or whatever is a legitimate response to some of those barriers, and then looking at how I and my office can help people sort of navigate way through it. In terms of whether I'm surprised, to be honest, I didn't really have any particular expectations. I've spent most of my professional life being dropped into projects, just having to very quickly get up to speed with an enormous amount of information and then get into decision-making mode. And so it might be a completely different sector to me and a completely different new lot of information. But in that respect, I think I'm quite unsurprisable, which probably isn't the answer that you were looking for, but that's been my experience.
Anybody else? Shane. Thanks, Shane. Post-COVID, there's been a lot of provisions which were taken away just simply because they couldn't manage the lockdown period, particularly among sort of mental health provisions, most of which, without those provisions, have basically fallen on the remit of the police, and it's not their job to do it. So are there any sort of explorations as to how to mend that provision and therefore relieve the police of that particular responsibility?
Yeah, so yes, there are. Within about 2 weeks of my term starting in May this year, the Chief Constable pressed the button on rolling out Right Care, Right Person, which people may have heard of but perhaps don't know the detail of it. There is a slight misunderstanding. It's only slight, really. There's a miscomprehension that RCRP, Right Care, Right Person, is about only dealing with people in mental health crisis. I don't know if you're familiar with the Right Care, Right Person sort of approach. What that means is that basically all the calls that come through into the control room go through this sort of process of trying to establish what it says on the tin, basically who the right person is to go to that person and what care that person needs in order to have the right response. Because you are absolutely right. Over the years, the police have been both the first port of call and also the call of last resort for any number of different things, and it's placed an enormous burden on individual officers and on the constabulary as a whole. There was, understandably, I think, given just some of the historic issues with NSFT, there was a lot of concern around the rollout of RCRP and what it might mean for people in mental health crisis. So I have been spending, less so now, but certainly at the beginning of my term, I spent a lot of time getting very detailed briefs around RCRP and what that good sort of call handling, if you like, would look like for people in mental health crisis. And it has been really reassuring to see actually the police are continuing to go out where there is risk to life, where there are real issues and they are the right person or, the right sort of response. But what has also been really great to see from my point of view, especially given the historic difficulties within NSFT, has actually been for me how happy now they are to also come towards me. So I've had a number of very, very constructive meetings with, I attended like a governor's meeting. I've met with the chief exec a couple of times. Today I met with the chief medical officer. And actually that kind of organisational sort of defensiveness that we might have seen in NSFT just as residents, a few years ago, is really subsiding. And actually it's turning into, I think, potentially really exciting conversations, ranging from, so I will go to 136 Suite, I will go and have a look at what that experience is like, and the CMO is going to come to us and go to a PIC and understand what the detainee's point of view is within our custody suites as well. And that kind of sharing of day-to-day knowledge will really help identify where we might be able to collaborate together to have most impact. And I think that has the potential to be really quite transformational for people in Norfolk, because my hope is that, through working collaboratively with NSFT, actually mental health provision can get better, quicker, in some small way with working together there. Does that answer your question? Great.
Anybody else? Peter.
One of your roles is to hold the Chief Constable to account. So when you go through the budget round, as I'm sure you're doing now, we all know that turkeys don't vote for Christmas. So how are you going to ensure that we get value for money?
So, well, this is the thing, isn't it? That we have the same as a public authority. We have exactly the same legal obligations that yourselves do in terms of returning a balanced budget. And there's also an enormous amount of statutory duties that the police and the constabulary have to fulfil. There's the strategic policing requirement, which has very clear requirements of all constabularies in terms of what they provide. And there's also obviously an enormous number of statutory duties beyond that at a local level. I'm not entirely sure what you mean in your turkeys don't vote for Christmas analogy, but put plainly, sorry?
Can I explain?
Yeah, if you want.
At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we get value for money. So obviously people who are employed in the police service have a vested interest in staying in the police service. how are you going to ensure that we have the right number of people, not more than we need, to deliver the service that we're all after?
So firstly, value for money. I don't know if people do want value for money. What I think people, when they talk to me, what they want is for crimes that they are victim of to be solved. They want the police to care properly about looking after victims through that criminal justice system. They want people to be brought to justice, and people seem to want that in quite different ways. Obviously, there are times when people feel that should be punitive. There are other times when they just want to see that person clean up their mess. Do you see what I mean? The thing that people don't talk to me about, actually, I think I can say with complete honesty, you're the first person to say it, is value for money. People want that service to work well, and actually when people have spoken with me in whatever medium, there is a really high respect for the police in Norfolk, but interactions with the police which are negative have a really profound effect on people's trust of the police. And actually a lot of people have said, and I think this will come through in the data, is that they want that trust to be restored again, and that can only happen if the police are doing the right thing by victims of crime and bringing people to justice in a way that is relevant, basically, and timely as much as they can. In terms of the numbers of people, that isn't in my gift. So that is in the gift of the Home Office to a large extent, because all of the uplift on the 20,000 police officers is absolutely sort of baked into everything, and nobody can do that without losing money from the Home Office. But the main person who gets to decide on resourcing is, of course, the Chief Constable, because there is a clear sort of dividing line between the operational decision making, which is the Chief's, and then the priority setting and some of the day-to-day work around partnerships, which is in the PCC's role. So hence the holding to account has to be outcome-led rather than just data-led around people. It is a matter of fact that we have got far fewer people now than we've had in the past around PCSOs. That's obviously a massive issue for a lot of people living in Norfolk. But it's not necessarily been in the Chief Constable's gift to actually put those PCSOs back, because funding from the Home Office has been absolutely rigidly prescribed in terms of spend. So that there is nuance to there. It'd be very easy for me to just go, oh yes, well, I'll look at the numbers and we'll look at the budget and we'll tick that box. But actually that just would be a lie, basically, and I'd rather give you a more nuanced view around what people are telling me, because ultimately I am going to hold the chief accountable based on what people tell me around their experience of the police and their experience as victims of crime. I think you are, genuinely. I mean, but also I should say, as a resident of Norfolk, I will hold the chief to account in relation to your experience as well, because just because you're the only person so far to have raised the value for money point doesn't make it any less legitimate. It just means it is a quieter point compared to the others that have been made to me, and that's also something I really want to get across. I take it really seriously that I have to somehow find a way of bringing every part of our community's voice into policing, into that accountability process. And it's going to look really different depending on which part of the community I'm talking with and the questions that are being raised. So I know we're having a bit of fun about it now, but it's absolutely a legitimate point. Well, me too, 25 years in the private sector, but ultimately, if you look at where the funding is in terms of where we were in 2010, well, no, I think it's a point that is worth making, because I'm next week going to be sat on a panel talking about police productivity, and I do apologise to everyone else who does not find productivity fascinating, but I think it's salient here to me exactly, which is why we're going to have a little chat about it. So well, I think we are. But let's test that hypothesis. So police productivity has received an awful lot of attention over recent years. In the previous government, there was really sort of stemming as a result of the sort of austerity programme, if you like. You'll remember there was an awful lot of attention paid to efficiencies and efficiency savings. I'm going back to when I was working in framework consultancies, that kind of thing. So there has been a body of work done, commissioned by the prior government, to look for productivity savings within the police. Now, the fascinating thing for me is that you can have productivity for productivity's sake, you can have value for money, but the emphasis should be on the V word, right? What is the value? What is it about? Is it just about cutting costs? Where is the value for people sort of at the other end of it? Otherwise, it's just money, right? So productivity, you can either just like count the beans, or you can say, what are we generating productivity for? What are we making the prospect of policing more efficient in order to do? And what is fascinating to me is that nobody has said what that is. So the police do not work in Tesco's, they don't stack beans on shelves. You know, productivity isn't a thing that you can measure by money going through the till or, you know, numbers of units sold. There's no sort of transactional element for the police, nor can you measure it in hours saved as a block. You know, we're not in the kind of, you know, time motion mapping or process mapping for this, because ultimately policing is this Gordian knot of different activities which result in people being brought to justice and victims being supported. And I find it, and this is not a joke, I find it absolutely fascinating that nobody has ascertained why productivity is important. And so basically what that means is there's no test. When recommendations come forward from the Inspectorate of the Constabulary or anyone else, there's no test about what that recommendation has to do, what the outcome of it is, what's the value of that recommendation, what does it mean for officers, what's the cost of that in time, what does it mean for victims of crime, what does it mean for the investigation rates. It's completely silent on it, which means that every single recommendation has got some sort of like false equivalence. There's no prioritisation, and that means that every time you save an hour over there, it's immediately backfilled by those sort of recommendations that come from the College of Policing or HMIC. So I do think we need to be talking more about it, but with much more focus on the value part and and on what productivity needs to actually achieve in people's real world sort of experiences. No, I don't think you did, but I think it's already quite cheap as chips, and unfortunately we're paying the price of that. So, and I think that's an observable fact as well when you look at caseload and things. But well, you know, but this is also my job, right? Is to listen to what you're saying, push back where I think pushback is relevant, but also to have that conversation, because it's like I said, there's some legitimacy there for sure.
That's all right. I was going to ask something myself, because I think the police, in much the same way as a lot of our institutions, there's a sort of sense that people feel that they're broken, that they don't deliver what they perhaps believe it always used to deliver. And I could go back to, you could think about the NHS, you could think about Parliament, you could think about the BBC or anything, those are the things that people will talk individually about. Oh, I dealt with our local policeman. For example, I reckon all of us go to our parish council meetings, we meet the policemen who come and serve our communities, and we can't say enough good things about them and all the work they're doing. However, you speak to members of the public and their perception of the police is that they no longer have a trust in the institution of the police, in the same way as they don't trust politicians, but they speak very highly about, usually about their own local MP and about their local councillor, but then they don't like politicians. You know the story, how it goes. So how do you rebuild the trust? Now, without giving any examples specifically to my area, which I know of a few, but when you think of, you get told by people who have reported issues to the police that they get fed back with CCTV evidence, well, there's no point in taking any action. That lad's quite a troubled lad. He's been to court already and it hasn't changed him, so we're not going to pursue this. And you go, but there's evidence of vandalising going on. There's those sorts of things get fed back to me from people regularly. and they just go, I don't know what I should do. I don't know. There's no point in me phoning the police. There's no point in me following things up. And it comes back as a teacher, we have this motto in my school, what you permit, you promote. And I don't want children or teenagers to be instantly criminalised, but there is a sense that things are let slip because, well, we haven't got the time to deal with them. But my experience is, I love children, and there was a boy in the news last week who I taught a few years ago. He did leave our school quite early, I will say, but he's now serving several years in prison for a knife crime. And I'm wondering to what extent the missteps were in place that could have dealt with him early on, obviously not within your tenure of office, but you know, there are missteps all the way, and I think that there's a sense that people, and I've got a few nods when I said it, but people feel that they don't think the institution works, and I don't know if you've got that within your power. I mean, within my personal view, you know, it was a sort of, when they introduced the police and crime commissions, it's sort of the worst kind of Americanisation of something which should never be politicised. But the role exists, and you sound like you've got some good ideas, but I'm wondering if you've got any ideas about how we're going to rebuild that trust.
Right, let's try and cover that in less than half an hour. So, well, I'm kind of making light of it, but actually that gets completely to the heart of the problem. So just on the PCC role, I'm just going to be perhaps a little bit inflammatory and just state as a fact that policing has always been, and probably should be, political, little p, but not politicised. So I think, like in general, whatever form of democracy you have, it's always going to be imperfect. But the police authorities were not perfect. You know, people would rock up having not read the papers. There was a homogeneity in a lot of places because the political makeup was homogenous, and therefore there wasn't much challenge there either. And I think if my inbox is anything to go by, I think the Police and Crime Commissioner, even though not many people really know what the role is, I am directly accessible. I get doorstep, like, please, people, this is not an invitation. Like, literally, people stop me in the street for a chat about their issue. I get stopped in Tesco because people know who I am. And yeah, that might not be everyone, but there is an understanding that actually if you've got an issue and I've got 5 minutes, I will listen to what you've got to say and I will do something about it. And I don't know, as someone in, you know, the age that I am, I do remember a time pre-PCCs, and it really wasn't all that to a lot of extent. I don't think it was as democratically accountable, actually, because it was made up like so many of our panels, which is to say that there isn't that democratic process in there. And I think we only have to look over the last couple of years to see to what an extraordinary extent the police can be used as a political football. And actually, a PCC doing a job well, they might come in a political wrapper, if you know what I mean. But my view on this is that is basically shorthand for the electorate. Plus, also, it costs £5,000 to get your nomination in. Like, there's a piece of bureaucracy there, which is expensive. And so if you're on a political party, it does facilitate that. But actually, the role can only really work well if you are persistently apolitical. You know, if you recognise the apolitical nature of the police, and you also recognise that you are representing every single person within your community, you know. So that might sound a bit idealistic, but that is genuinely where I'm coming from. So you can hold me to account on that. But I know that there are issues with it, but I also wonder how much of it is because, as we saw tonight, so few people really know what the PCC could do. Do you see what I mean? And how it could work. It has a real ability within that statutory bundle to transform an area by working with other people. So I think the more people who know that, the busier we can all be and draw on all of those levers to work together to make this system work for us and work for our residents. Again, that might sound a bit sort of naive, but that is where I'm coming from, because I think we can do that sort of together. In terms of the sort of trust and confidence piece, I was just thinking about the last police and crime panel, because there was something to be said around that, and I just thought, I don't know, people have been, as I said earlier, have been so consistent in taking time out of their day to come and talk with me or email me or write like physical letters into my office about how they are finding something difficult to navigate, or they feel like they've been let down by some part of the system, which may or may not be the police, and that they don't trust it, or that feeling of like, oh, we've got someone's trying to kick my door down again. I had this on our local like Facebook page, you know, someone's trying to like kick doors down in our streets, there's no bloody point, no one will come, you know, that kind of feeling. And that's what we were talking about the last police and crime panel. I think people do want trust to be restored. They want to be able to trust the police, but in that sort of conversation, I think there's sort of two things going on. They do want to trust the police, like the constabulary, that is there, but they also want to trust the system, that they've got, that the system is there for them when they need it. When we need it, as we surely will at some point in our lives, we want to feel reassured that who we need to go to in our times of need will basically just sort it out. Do you know what I mean? And I think there's been this sort of absolutely endemic failure to do that in different ways, different small ways, but they compound people's feelings. So you're talking about the BBC and other things, like everyone feels that. I was talking with some people in their 20s a few weeks ago, and I said, you know, I'm going to give you an ancient history lesson. So I gave them a lesson about 1997 and the general election. And we sort of forget that when we've grown up through something, a lot of people in their 20s have no clue about what we're talking about. So they hear me talking about the opportunities that I had in my 20s, like I'm just a nostalgic middle-aged person. I kind of think, well, yeah, I am a nostalgic middle-aged person, but actually, it's only 15 years ago. It's not nostalgia for the 1950s. It's nostalgia for when I was 32, you know. And I think because we can all remember that, we remember what good looked like. So if we're in our 40s, late 30s, we actually were adults at that time. And if we were older than that, we remember the time before that as well. We lived through the improvements. We remember what that looked like for our kids to have opportunities. And now we see our other kids not have those same opportunities. So it can feel nostalgic, but I think a lot of the reason is because it was our actual experience, and we've seen year on year this greater friction in our lives when we're trying to get things done. So yeah, definitely not in my gift to fix the entire system, but what I think we need to start acknowledging is that those frictions are there, this relentless focus. Apologies, Councillor Bullman, this isn't sort of, but I think your point earlier was useful. This kind of relentless focus on money and not on people's experience, the consequences of cuts and changes, a willingness to go, do you know what, we tried it, this did not turn out how we thought it would, and double back on things, you know, has been a bit absent. And so I'm just very much of the mindset that we all, whoever we are, however we work within the system, need to recognise that we are part of a system. Do you see what I mean? And start working together to, and it, you know, if it's in Dave Brailsford sort of marginal gains territory, so be it. You know, if we can just tweak that one thing over there, make that thing over there 0.5% better, then I'll take it every day of the week. Because what I'd like to do is that across lots of different areas, and incrementally make things better. If we can get the high impact stuff as well, lovely. I'll take that every day of the week as well. But do you see what I mean? I'm looking absolutely everywhere at what we can do.
We'll finish with a quick comment from Councillor Tibble, Adrian.
Yeah, just a quick one. Thank you for coming along this evening. It's great to have you here. It's good to make it regular. What we do in terms of, I've personally witnessed myself in local co-op, the epidemic on shoplifting, as in terms of the people working in the shops getting abused physically and verbally, and then the despondent response of not bother calling the police because nothing will be done about it. So it's just a rise and rise. And you know, when I witnessed it, I've witnessed it firsthand and saw, you know, the abuse, throwing items of shop and a member of staff and just walking out with a massive great bag of stuff from a local co-op. And it's horrendous. So is there anything we're looking to do to try to tackle that? Because, you know, I think one of the shops I went to, you know, they said, the police said, oh, just get a security guard and put them on the door. But a small corner shop is saying, well, if I get a security guard, once I pay for security guard, yes, that costs me more than the goods I'm losing. But so there's real difficult things. So what's been done around that one? So shoplifting.
Okay, so few things. Let's see how many I remember. So the kind of problem in some respects of conversations like this is we naturally, and this is to your point earlier, you know, like that undermining trust, is we always talk about the stuff that isn't going well because it's the stuff we notice. The Norfolk Constabulary is top of the tree when it comes to detecting retail crime. They are the best in the country. Their detection rates absolutely outshine a lot of other areas. Now, on the one hand, that's brilliant. Again, every day of the week, I'll take that. But actually, in absolute terms, it means that there is still lots. You know, we might be brilliant compared with all the other forces, but as an absolute level, there's still a lot that can be done. So what they have done is a really great piece of work, actually, which is to acknowledge the fact that, and I think there's a bit of work to be done with communicating with people like me, who I've worked for years and years on the shop floor. There's still a bit of a sense that when shoplifting happens, if you don't see a police officer set foot over the threshold, it's not getting dealt with. But actually the way that shoplifting is detected now has really changed. It does all happen through digital technology and just behind a desk. And the detection rates in Norfolk and the fact that they've had some of the highest prison terms on shoplifters because of the weight of evidence around some of the repeat offenders that they've managed to bring to justice, I think speaks to that work. There is a lot of really good work happening. What I'd like to see is more of it happening across the county. It tends to, again for good reasons at the moment, be focused in our city and the bigger sort of urban areas, but that's because it's got to start somewhere. Do you know what I mean? It's not deliberately there and not everywhere else, it's just that it's starting there. There is a lot that can be done with other retailers. I had a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to more conversations actually with the security teams for some of our bigger supermarkets, because they do play a part, of course, especially in the shoplifting to order that happens. If people don't know, shoplifting to order is absolutely off the charts bad for retailers currently, and there's a lot of work happening with groups of retailers coming together, even on quite simple things like WhatsApp chats, to help them sort of just get an early heads up and preventative there. So there is, like, honestly, we should be celebrating Norfolk's work because they are doing some really, really excellent work in that space. But like I said, we want more to happen as well. And there's a lot of work happening around what that looks like. So more partnership conversations with things like retail parks, where, you know, you get that kind of, you know, going from one to another, you know, and that kind of group work. And then we're also looking at, this is outside your authority area, but there's been some really interesting results through the use of street wardens that were paid for through the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner through Safer Streets Fund. So Thetford has had a couple of street wardens, and that has transformed the retailers' experience. They were there originally to help address ASB in the town, and street drinking and that kind of thing. But talking with retailers on the high street there, they are just like hands down delighted with how much even just street wardens, do you see what I mean? Not PCSOs, not officers, but even just street wardens have really helped transform that. So the Chief and I have been having a number of conversations around what different interventions could look like. Again, from the value for money point of view, do we need officers every time? Is there different kind of models that we could use to get some form of uniform on the street to deliver some sort of benefit, even if it's not top drawer? Do you see what I mean? If it's not officers, what else can we do? And no, I have no doubt those conversations will keep taking place for the rest of my term, because it's a absolutely sort of interminable problem that we need to solve.
Thank you. I think we've probably exhausted everything at that point. Or at this point, it would be wonderful if at some point in the future you could come back and speak to us again. You've mentioned the fact that you're moving forward with a number of initiatives and things, and also we possibly face the possibility of, you said, of some revision of services based on the funding available. So obviously there might be some questions about that in the future when those decisions are made. So it would be nice if we could see you again. Thank you very much. I know your time is very valuable, so thank you very much for coming along, and I'm sure we will be in touch. Thank you. Right. Mike's already in place for the next agenda item. Working with housing providers. Mike, we're in your good hands with the rest of your team, so Richard as well.
Do you want me to go?
Thank you, Chairman. We'll Richard will crack on, and then we'll answer questions. So that's fine.
Thank you very much, Chair. I know it's late, so I'm not going to go through this in massive detail. Got some slides which I'll fly through and then fill some questions. So Scrutiny, just to remind everyone, provided me with 3 recommendations to go away and start pushing forward. First of all was to look at performance of our housing associations. Second of all was to make sure we're sharing the data that we need to make sure our residents are getting the protection they need. And the third one is to look at a housing strategy. I'll go through some of the performance now. So recommendation 1, when we went through the scrutiny process, we realised that it was working in line with the time that Arab's law was coming into place. So we started having tenant satisfaction measures. For the last couple of scrutinies, I've been saying that they're coming, don't worry, they'll be here soon. They are here now. So I have detailed some of the performance of our housing associations. I've focused on Clarion on the next page, so I'm just going to hold this up just for a second, just so you can get some idea of some of the numbers. But the main ones you care about are Clarion, which are on the next page. This is all detailed in appendix, I think 1, if not 2, in the report. So then Clarion are here. So Clarion are doing pretty well in some areas, weak in others, and I think that covers all housing associations. Some are doing better in some places, some are doing worse in others. In previous scrutinies, I've talked about the fact that I'm the chair of Norfolk Housing Alliance, which is all the housing associations and all the local authorities. We've been waiting for this data to come out so we can start providing them with the opportunity to learn from one another. If I start telling housing associations how they should perform, it will not go down particularly well. The best people to do so are the other housing associations who are performing better. There is a small element of competition here. No one wants to be the worst at any one thing. So we're going to use the Housing Alliance as an opportunity to compare notes so they can start learning from one another and how they can perform better. The only thing I will say on this, though, is whilst a lot of these feedbacks are from their customers and how they feel about it, their statutory compliance has come out very, very positive. So that they're all doing the health and safety things that they need to do to make sure our residents are safe. Where people are frustrated is where they are not getting the service that they feel that they should otherwise get. Okay. I've also put within the report some statements from landlords. All of them, as a consequence of this, are now going through a review process to look at how they can remodel their operational delivery to increase their TSMs. Same with Clarion as well. Okay, this is all in the report, so sorry I'm rushing through, again conscious of time. Next, I'm going to lead over to Nick.
Thank you very much. So just in relation to antisocial behaviour, I'm not going to add too much because this is a continuation of what's been briefed previously. So working with the largest 3 housing associations, so Clarence, Saffron and Victory Flagship, all of whom have quite subtly different approaches, and yet they have some very effective mechanisms for dealing with antisocial behaviour. You've already seen an indicator that shows that around 55-65% of cases or respondents are saying they're satisfied with the handling of antisocial behaviour. I have to tell you that that statistic is really hard to achieve by housing associations, but we are working with all 3 in different ways. Clarion have introduced a complex cases team, which helps them to get on top and grip difficult cases. Victory Flagship are talking about can they receive delegation from this authority to carry out low-level enforcement, which would be another way of increasing our reach. And we're working closely with Saffron and the new director there on how they would like to take their strategy forward. There are a lot of different metrics. We are working on on how we can most closely work in different ways with each of those. So that's just to give you a little bit of a flavour of where we're working. But you can see some themes on the slide in front of you in terms of themes of working at the moment. I'll hand back to Richard.
Thank you, Nick. Recommendation 2 was regarding data sharing, to make sure we have put training in place. So within the last review, we realised that all the data sharing, all the infrastructure is there. What wasn't there was the fact that we haven't trained our staff fully in feeling confident about sharing. So we'd had a couple of data breaches. Everybody actually just went back into their rabbit holes the right way. I won't share anything then. We've trained them to make sure that they are sharing things, the appropriate information at the appropriate time, to make sure the safeguarding of our customers are put into place. To prove I've done it, I'll put some of the slides that we did within the training up on the slide deck. We're also looking at doing a cross-county data sharing agreement between local housing associations as well. So when someone obtains a house from us, we have a data sharing agreement with the housing association. If that person then moves to another housing association through a mutual exchange, there isn't the data sharing there. So we're now looking at a wider reaching data sharing agreement, so we can cover all permutations. That is cross-county though, so please bear with me while I work through the various data governance processes there. Final thing we're looking at doing is we're currently running a pilot to any allocation of properties of developments over 10 units. We're looking at splitting them out a little bit more, so 1/3 emergency, 1/3 other bands and 1/3 internal transfers. This requires a lot of data sharing to make sure we're doing so. The reason we're doing this is to make sure we get mixed estates. We're finding with the heightened level of homelessness, the high levels of vulnerability are essentially being picked out of our TA and put into an estate, and we need to manage our estates moving. That creates a problem down the line, and I'm sure Nick hears about those problems. So we need to make sure that those allocations are done in a more sensible manner. Whenever we do that, we end with a net neutral amount of social housing going to people in TA, because it all works through the system. It just means that not everybody's going to that one estate. The final recommendation was to look at and develop a housing strategy. These are the indicative dates. Please do not hold me to it. And it is going to take some time. We've got an internal departmental working group going through this, and we're looking at starting it January 25. It's going to take about 18 months at least. I would say we're going to be looking at June 26 by the time we've got a document in front of you showing what the grand plan will be. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I invite comments. We'll start with Caroline.
Thank you for that. I did notice the percentages for the handling of antisocial behaviour is quite low, and I hope we can get that higher in the future, because it does affect residents. My own residents have been affected quite badly with antisocial behaviour, and it's not been dealt with in a very quick manner. So I hope we can get that raised in the future.
If you wanted a response on that, typical dissatisfaction rates with antisocial behaviour handling historically have been in the order of 70-75%. So a satisfaction rate of 55-65 is actually relatively good compared to what it can look like. So you have to view that in the context of not all problems can be solved, and therefore not all people are satisfied. It's not necessarily how the response was provided, although the measure talks about handling. But we will continue, just to reassure you, we will continue to work on the speed, the getting the right agency first time, and making sure any escalations happen as quickly as they need to. We've already overhauled the case review process, the ASB case review process. So there's no complacency, and we will keep a close eye on that.
Thank you. I think we need to, because it does affect people's lives and their quality of life. I had one resident who actually thought about moving because it got so bad. So thank you.
Fran, and then it'll be Mark.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the report. It's really good, and the presentation as well. I was really pleased about you looking to address the GDPR issue between the different people, which is not as simple as it sounds. I know. So, but I'm sure you'll get there. And the working group as well. I think that's a really good idea. I just wanted to know what the makeup of was the working group, because obviously you've got Phil Courtier heading that up, which is good. but I just wondered who else was involved with it. Obviously all the housing associations, but have you got the right people? I mean, you may not know at this moment in time, but if you do, and the other question I wanted to ask was around the change to the 1/3 mix as such, means that there'll be less people from temporary accommodation being housed long term, and I was just wondering about the modelling of the potential costs of that in the short term and obviously long term as well. So I'm guessing that's part of the working group, but I just wanted to ask that question tonight. So sorry putting you on the spot there, but yeah, thank you.
So the working group is in its infancy. Okay, so it's at the present. Phil's leading on it. In respect to people involved, it's limited to senior managers involved at the moment before we can start moving forwards. I just wanted to provide you with a reassurance because I've come back and said, don't worry, we'll do it a number of times now. I wanted to say we've now got a time frame. So throughout the whole process, there will be significant consultation as well. So it will be portfolio holders, it will be member bases, it will be housing associations, police. We need everybody involved in it to make sure we get a decent strategy to how we can deal with many aspects, and also appreciate that we can't deal with everything and we're going to have to pick and choose the things that are most important to us. Okay. Your second question, remind me. TA, yes, that's very astute of you. Yes, it's very true. We've got a balance, haven't we? So, but the only time we're not going to do so any internal transfer that goes into these properties. So, say we flagship deliver a load and we move one person from flagship to another, they are not allowed to dispose of that property. That's part of the deal. So we end up with a net equal of the amount of people that move on from TA. It just might take a little bit longer than it otherwise would because you've got to wait for that void to become available for that TA. However, the overall demand on the service and our team, because if I put everybody in one estate and they cause problems and then they present as homeless, the overall impact on the service is a saving from taking this action. And it is only a pilot. So I want to pilot it to see if it works. Then we can look at those potential impacts as part of the pilot.
But obviously you'll model all that as you go through the working group and just see how it follows through. But obviously there's a cost, as you say, whichever way you look at it, there's a cost, whether it's a financial cost or indirect financial cost, obviously through dealing with antisocial behaviour, maybe having to move people again, etc. But I just wanted to make sure we had that within the model. Thank you.
Mark.
One of my questions, or my main real question is, these three providers, are they geographically equal around the Broadland area, or do they have like slight patches throughout the area? I know that's a bit of a bugger of a question, but it will potentially change the way that their data comes through, because obviously different areas will have different feelings about certain things.
I should have been clearer, sorry. The data in which you're seeing is for reorganisation, it's not for the geographical location. Okay? So that's, yeah, so Clarion will be on a national footprint. I would say Clarion are better locally than they are nationally, but they only have to report on one TSMs, and they could, and unfortunately, as much as we would like them to, they don't monitor their they don't have a system that monitors feedback on our district boundary, so I couldn't even ask them to provide it even if I could. So, and so therefore I'm hoping I don't have to answer the first part of your question about geographical locations.
Shane.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, first of all, can I just comment that the figures that we're seeing now in Appendix 1 is a world away from where we started, which was very, very disjointed. So, I mean, it's pleasing to see that things are starting to come together, which sort of begs the question as to how far can we possibly harmonise these surveys to the point where you're going to get sort of a consistency across all of the providers.
Again, unfortunately, because of a national impact, because we're looking at it on a wider footprint, the harmony will do. I don't know how Clarion's stock in Newcastle is, for example, and that will have a direct impact on these. What they are is a conversation starter, so we can start looking at where the problems are, and they then are forced to come up with strategies and policies which would address these concerns, which otherwise in the past would have been, oh yeah, but the data says that, but actually our recording is different to your recording. So they were able to hide between the inconsistencies and how they recorded it. Now you can't do that, and they have to actually address their problems.
Should we just and certainly, well, these reporting measures, the CSMs, were started by the last administration, the last government. That's now moved forward, and this government is certainly talking about developing that, develop that further. So we are in the first year. I think we will start to see more consistency, more regulations as we start to see where these figures are coming from. I think there'll be a more consistent approach, and I hope localised working as well. So for us, it's all fine seeing what Clarion do, but I don't really, like Richard said, I don't really care what happens in Newcastle. I want to know what's happening in Broadland. So will we start to see that? Certainly, the talk about government is to move towards that. So I'm hoping we'll see that come.
Caroline.
Just as a matter of interest, is this a follow-on from what the Time and Task Panel did with? So we do good work, don't we? That's an overview in Scrutiny. Lovely.
And I would say, actually, this was a direct result of the Time and Task Panel. The TSMs were a national figure by, and Michael Coe started this. But actually, this is a piece of work that was really good and started. And actually, certainly our housing providers came in and spoke to local members and the panel, and they found it really empowering. They would like to come and do this. And certainly when we're looking to do this, and the proposal is that we bring these in because these will be national figures. That actually we invite our partners in, and we invite those housing providers to come back in and talk through their issues, because they should be quite rightly proud, but they're also happy to be challenged when things are going wrong, and that's a great way to do it. But it was a supportive panel.
Just there's a couple of things. I was going to ask about. I couldn't understand how we got 99.9% as one of the statistics, but that explains it now, because obviously it's national figures, and I thought, my God, 1,000. We've had to have 1 out of 1,000 for that percentage regarding asbestos as well, which I thought that was a really quite a pertinent one. But let's explain that. When I don't want to digress too much. I do data for my school, and so over the half term I did this massive data haul of just trying to measure everything possible that I can possibly do. We're due to the Ofsted inspection at any time, so I just thought, what will this data haul and looking at everything through everything tell me? And I spent ages producing pages of data which told me exactly what I already knew, unfortunately. But so it hasn't told me if so then what. Basically what we were doing was what we already needed to know. But having had this data, is there anything that now makes you say, right, we need to look at this one aspect? Is there anything that's jumped out, or is there any housing provider that's jumped out in any way as being, why is that? Why are they so out of line with everyone else?
I'd have to say the safety. So, I mean, just looking at Clarion, the satisfied that their home is safe is 69.8%. Why are people not, even though all their health and safety is met, why are people not feeling safe in their home? And I think once people feel safe in their home, they feel more confident about developing life, etc. If you don't feel unsafe, if you don't feel safe and you feel you can't go home to a safe, secure place, that's going to cause issues. So I think that's one thing I'll be focused on, because it encompasses so many other things. Feeling safe, it encompasses ASB, it encompasses the quality of your home. So I'll probably be looking at that one.
Can I just add just momentarily to that? So several of the housing associations are particularly focused on area plans or neighbourhood plans or estate plans. And one of those factors is going to be how safe and secure do you feel in your local neighbourhood. So often the satisfaction rating that you've just been hearing about isn't about in your home, it's in your community, which is a distinction. We will be focusing on that more and more closely, because one of the satisfaction measures we need to keep an eye on is how, on individual locality by locality, the safety and security and the freedom from antisocial behaviour is felt by local communities. That's probably going to be less numerical and more story-based, so we'll be looking to share with you outcomes of that nature as well. But I can reassure you that all three housing associations we've been referring to have different approaches, granted, but they have approaches to ensuring that they are walking their estates and they can sense and see and measure the improvement in the safety that people are feeling. So that statistic often refers to the environment and the community rather than inside the home. We will be focusing on that distinction to make sure we know what it means.
Yeah, and even going back to the statistic you raised earlier about dealing with antisocial behaviour, or was it about dealing with antisocial behaviour? Something like that. When it's dealt with, it's like the injury has still been done to you, so you still feel the hurt and the pain from that, even if it was actually dealt with incredibly well. But the nature of the antisocial behaviour leaves you scarred, essentially. So that's why you may be rating it down.
Neighbours who are abusive to you, you don't feel safe going back into your home.
So, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands. Oh, Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just whilst you're asking them about the safety of the home for having such a low score, perhaps you might want to ask them about houses being well maintained. That's a pretty low score, really, 60.5%. I think that's far more important than the safety of, I suppose, as equally important as the safety of home, really.
I will do. I mean, when you look at the satisfied with the time taken to complete the repair, we've got to balance. So they're doing all their emergency repairs really quickly. All their health and safety are really, really well as well. But they're still not qualified. They're still not satisfied with the quality of the repairs in which they're getting. And I think that's something we definitely want to dig into. Is it the quality of a repair, or is it an expectation concern which we're facing, and how is that being communicated to them? And I think that's where we need to delve into it a little bit more.
Adrian.
Just on what you said there, so like emergency repairs, non-emergency, that's in the target, so I assume that's a target timescale. Are they set by the housing providers? Are they set nationally, those targets? Because it's like, if I look at the Saffron emergency repairs, 66%, the others are up into the low 90%, which is where you'd expect it to be, which suggests a very quick fix. But a third of the time, 1 in 3 chance that your emergency repair doesn't get done within the timescale. So is that timescale set at a national level or by the housing provider themselves? Because, yeah.
I'll have to find that out, but I'm 99% sure it is the housing association that sets their own timeframes, because it's in their interest to make sure that those emergency repairs are done. Hello? There you go. I did ask Saffron themselves why that score's so low, and of course I'm getting the stock answer when I say this. We are currently going through a review of why our and looking at how we can better meet our targets. So, and that's where they're all at the moment. They've finally got the results. They're figuring out how they're going to deal with it and figuring out what we can learn from one another.
I'm aware that recommendation number 3, thank you very much, Sinead, hadn't taken it fully in, on the recommendations is also mentions for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to consider whether further updates are required or whether the committee is happy with the direction of travel within the normal operational provisions. I don't want to lead people in that, but I'm interested to hear people's opinions on whether we are happy. Mike wants to also say something at this point. Go on, Mike.
Well, I was just going to say to that, what we want to do, so a lot of this stuff is now operational updates. I think what would be useful for the Scrutiny Committee is to see those annual results come in, and then from there, then we can review on, rather than, because we've done a lot of, just updates about operational work. The Scrutiny Committee to actually scrutinise the results every year would be probably the best place to go, I would suggest.
I noticed that because Mike leaves in a couple of weeks, that he's just volunteering the team to do a report next year whilst he's not going to be here. But go on.
Add into that, I would then advocate if it's a 1-year thing, we're going to get the housing associations here to do it as well, so then they can answer those questions direct rather than me trying to talk on their behalf. So rather than coming every period of time when they're less likely to take ownership of that, let's bring them back annually to be able to answer that themselves.
Get that in the form of wording that we all happy with. Sinead's looking very happy with that. Then I think we take that as the recommendation number 3. which I think we can trust Sinead is going to put into the form of wording that we would like. So all those in favour of the recommendations and the amended third recommendation, vote now. Thank you very much. Mike, is that your last stint with us? It is, I think.
This is Chairman, yes. Yeah.
I know you're doing a sort of a farewell tour of committees and things, but thank you for all your good work for the council over many years, and very best of luck in West Suffolk. West Suffolk, yeah. Thank you. We now move on to the customer experience programme. And Corinne. We've got one person who's made a quick dash for a break, so we'll wait 2 minutes so that he's able to, and anyone who needs a drink. We have been going for nearly an hour and a half, so I think we can have a 2-minute break. We take a 5-minute break, we can pause the live stream, so yeah, we'll do that. Or I can just sing a song for their entertainment. Christmas is around the corner. Okay.